Many years ago, there existed a dark witchcraft. As long as the organs of various organisms are dug out and pieced together, under the influence of witchcraft, they can be transformed into a brand new undead monster. This monster is incredibly powerful. Even if its head was severed, it remained unharmed. As long as its head were reattached, the demon's flesh would rapidly regenerate. Such a terrifying witchcraft. What kind of origin does it have? The fact that its earliest practitioners were not humans, but other forms of life. In a realm shrouded in mystery, resided a group of elves. They lived far away from the hustle and bustle of the world. However, humans, in their quest for land and resources, disturbed the tranquility of this place. Coalitions invaded the elves' homeland, and the winged elves endured merciless slaughter. Humans specifically bred werewolf warriors, who relentlessly pursued the elves. An elf was about to fall victim to the werewolf, when the elven warrior, Liss, descended from the sky. She engaged in a battle with the werewolf, and despite ultimately slaying the beast, she witnessed the tragic demise of her fellow kin. Liss chose to flee from this place, but she hadn't run far when she encountered a cliff. Liss leaped over the cliff, miraculously evading pursuit. Liss fell onto the deck of a ship. The ship belonged to another human faction called Berg. They had formed an alliance with the elves, together defending against external threats. 8 years ago, when the Berg army arrived in the Elven territory, the Elven leader opened the city gates and welcomed them. Under the guidance of the chieftain, all the warriors laid down their weapons, allowing humans to settle there. While a turning point in fate arrived, a human soldier named Reed, during his routine patrol, unexpectedly discovered a pair of vanished footprints. He climbed the steep cliff and intruded upon an elven relic. Within, treasures of the elven culture spanning millennia were kept. It was the sanctuary in the hearts of the elves. The intrusion of a stranger aroused the alertness of the elven woman, Liss. After punishing Reed, out of a desire to protect the relic and avoid more people being aware of it, Liss decided to pardon Reed. He was obligated to keep the secret of the elven sanctuary. From then on, Liss began monitoring Reed's actions to ensure the secret wouldn't be revealed. One day, the Berg stationed here suddenly lost contact with the front line. Their communication lines were secretly sabotaged by the enemy. Facing the abyss, human technology proved powerless. At this moment, Reed remembered the elven girl, Liss, and pleaded for her assistance in restoring communication. The elven girl soared through the air, with a cable in hand, across the chasm, establishing a new communication line for humans. In gratitude, Reed presented her with a book. 3 allied soldiers lurked in the distance. Observing their actions, they removed their clothing and neatly laid them on the ground. Next, 3 figures revealed themselves. Each of them held a syringe, preparing for a mysterious injection. Sudden movements alerted Reed and the others immediately. The horses at their camp had their necks mysteriously severed. Blood flowed down. The soldiers were brutally disemboweled and lost their breath. Reed searched the surroundings, and finally, in a crevice of a rock, he discovered the truth. A werewolf was devouring one of the soldiers. The werewolf's senses were highly acute, immediately sensing Reed's presence. Immediately, the werewolf pounced at him. Reed raised his gun and shot, killing the werewolf with a headshot. But the situation was not over yet. A second werewolf suddenly appeared. It almost cost Reed's life. Fortunately, in the critical moment, Liss came to his rescue in time and prevented the tragedy from happening. After a fierce fight, Reed's teammates in the squad finally managed to eliminate the werewolves. At this moment, Reed noticed his companions covered in blood, but they said that the blood wasn't theirs, but belonged to the werewolves. As the werewolf corpses transformed into human form, they were shocked beyond belief. This experience brought the elven girl and Reed closer together, and they began to talk about everything. Their relationship grew closer and closer. One day, Reed received news that their sovereign fortress was under siege by the Allied forces. Human soldiers were suffering heavy casualties. Blood was urgently needed on the front lines. However, due to the distant location of the front lines, officials were facing a difficult situation. At this moment, the Elven leader expressed their willingness to help. Using their ability to fly, the elves flew over a distance of 500 kilometers and could reach their destination in just a few hours. Upon hearing this news, Reed, despite feeling moved inside, chose to quietly leave. After the humans prepared the supplies, the elves, carrying precious blood, gracefully spread their wings and flew directly towards the fortress. At this moment, Reed found himself in a stone forest, but unexpectedly, a heavy rain poured down from the sky. He sought shelter from the rain, and fate arranged an unexpected encounter for him. In a cave where he sought refuge from the rain, Reed unexpectedly encountered Liss. In this rain, they had an intimate connection. Liss noticed two peculiar-shaped scars on Reed's back. In fact, those were the marks left by Reed's lost wings to conceal his identity in human society. He had never dared to seek treatment or donate blood. This matter touched Liss, and she displayed sympathy and compassion. So, at that moment, Liss made a vow to protect this man for his entire life. This encounter in the rain bound their fates closely together. After a series of events, this alliance composed of elves and Berg engaged in a full-scale conflict with the human allied forces. The allied forces' massive assault airship swiftly approached. Soon, they broke through the defense line. The allied forces launched a full-scale assault on the Elven capital. The elves ignited Molotov cocktails and soared into the air, attempting to inflict heavy damage on the human airships. However, these airships, being the most advanced combat vehicles of that time, even equipped with manually operated Gatling machine guns, quickly annihilated the Elven warriors with their fierce firepower. Simultaneously, the Allied forces' missiles rained down on the Elven castle, and the explosive sound of heavy shells shook hearts. Faced with such a powerful enemy, the elves realized a huge power gap in strength between the two sides, and could only scatter and flee in haste. The Elven leader urgently ordered Liss to immediately go to the sealed entrance of the Elven sanctuary. Liss asked Reed to stay in place and wait for her return, and then they would leave together with Reed. After Liss left, Reed deeply felt his duty as a soldier, and understood that he could not escape from this war. He knew Liss would accompany him, and so, he sought out the Elven leader, and pleaded with him to inform Liss of his sacrifice when she returned, so that Liss could give up hope for him and leave with everyone else. Little did they know, after Liss received this news, she was overwhelmed with grief and nearly fainted. The Elven leader had no choice but to support her and lead her away from the Elven capital. 8 years later, the invasion of humans once again shattered the peace of the elves. In order to seek refuge, Liss boarded a ship and left her Elven homeland to go to Berg, a land that had once provided assistance to the elves. While fate played its tricks, and the slave merchant ship encountered a hurricane. While sailing, their ship was engulfed by enormous waves. The next day, 2 children were playing on the grassy field when they unintentionally discovered the tragic scene at the seaside. The storm from last night had claimed the lives of almost all the crew members. An attendant immediately reacted and urged the 2 children to quickly report the situation to the city defense officer. After they left, the waves gently lapped the shore, and to everyone's surprise, Liss suddenly opened her eyes. Meanwhile, inside the beacon city in Berg, 2 opposing political officials were debating whether to accept refugees of different races. Looking back over the past century, humans, due to the rapid development of the Industrial Revolution, expanded recklessly across the globe, ruthlessly destroying the habitats of many living beings. Nevertheless, the human prime minister, to some extent, showed a conscience, accepting these races and granting them citizenship in exchange for cheap labor to fuel their own prosperity. The centaurs, due to their strong transportation abilities, became the primary workforce for human transportation, while the beautiful elves were forced to live in the mundane human world and sacrifice their bodies for the well-being of humans. The once noble half-goat people now had to engage in the most menial jobs, accompanied by human arrogance and oppression. 2 sergeants were being boastful, casually throwing the freshly chopped pig's head on the ground, when suddenly, a figure appeared, ordering the 2 sergeants to pick up the pig's head from the ground. The young man with curly hair, clearly inferior to his colleague behind him, intended to challenge the man alone. He did not anticipate that the other person would immediately knock him down, leaving him no courage to act recklessly again. At this moment, his colleague informed the man with curly hair that the man was the city's sheriff, who was currently investigating a case of Elven being bullied. After a brief conversation, the man learned that the culprit had a goatee, wore a uniform, and had a snake tattoo on his arm. The sheriff immediately had a suspect in mind, and it turned out to be one of his colleagues. Nevertheless, at that moment, York was dealing with a maritime accident, and Liss, a female elf, was the only survivor of the incident. According to regulations, all the cargo on the ship belonged to the shipowner, which made Liss the man's second slave. The man's sister, Gina, was a young lady accustomed to a luxurious lifestyle, unaware of the family's bankruptcy, and she dreamed of marrying into a wealthy family, eager to find a rich suitor. In their community, a new neighbor moved in, and their luxurious carriage symbolized their status. After applying her personalized perfume, Gina went to visit the newly arrived household. The man understood well that Gina was just an innocent young girl, and to avoid her offending someone who could harm them, he had no choice but to accompany Gina to the place. When the two arrived at the grand mansion, they were unexpectedly greeted by a half-goat person, who informed them that he was the owner of the place. The siblings intended to meet the owner of the mansion, but to their surprise, the owner turned out to be a lowly half-goat person. They quickly left the half-goat person's residence, afraid of being discovered by the neighbors, who would see them visiting such inferior beings. After returning home, they sought the help of a private lawyer, attempting to evict the half-goat person from the affluent neighborhood. Although the lawyer was also perplexed by this situation, he stated that there were no legal provisions regarding it, and purchasing real estate was the right of any individual. The siblings had no choice but to accept this. Meanwhile, as the sheriff investigated the perpetrator of Elven abuse, he discovered an important clue. That day, he came to request an investigation warrant against his colleague York, but he was refused by his superior. The sheriff was very displeased with the violation of Elven rights, but just at that moment, a sailor with a goatee in the corridor caught the attention of the sheriff. The sheriff enters the bar and pretends to be drunk. He starts searching the half-sheep man, and the sheriff quickly finds a snake-shaped tattoo on his arm. Just as he is about to apprehend the sailor tells him that darkness is approaching. Before the sheriff can react, the sailor leaps off and ends his own life. Meanwhile, a female elf is picking up fish and shrimp on the beach, while the tranquility of the seaside is shattered by strange noises coming from a nearby tunnel. Soon, an octopus approaches the female elf. Liss pours Gina's precious perfume into the drain. Unexpectedly, Gina returns at that moment, and is surprised to find her perfume missing while washing her hands. So Gina assigns Liss to go to a nearby store and buy another bottle. For Liss, who has never been outside, this is an opportunity to escape her confinement. She is nervous yet excited to step onto the street, as she searches for a hotel on a matchbox, because in the human world, she cannot live here in a normal way. After a while, she finally arrives at a small hotel. The female elf standing on the terrace is none other than Liss's childhood companion. Her companion has long integrated into human society, but she has become a plaything for humans. Both of them have drifted here and met again, feeling a strong sense of familiarity. However, during their conversation, the companion brings news to Liss. Reed is not dead. He holds an important position in this city. Upon hearing this news, Liss is greatly surprised. After Gina falls asleep, Liss quietly leaves. She goes to the kitchen and grabs a kitchen knife. Taking advantage of the darkness of the night, she flies over the window and heads straight to the sheriff's residence. Liss breaks through the window and lands on Reed. She looks at the man in front of her, and Liss never expected to meet Reed again. They face each other, and her heart is filled with mixed emotions. Reed is extremely relieved to see Liss alive, which indicates that his decision back then was correct, but Liss feels both happy and resentful that Reed is still alive. On the one side, she is happy because her beloved man is not dead. On the other side, she resents Reed for deceiving her. The knife is already held against Reed's neck, but she can't bring herself to strike. Liss came only to confirm if the rumors were true, and then she drops the knife and walks away. The next day, Gina takes Liss to stroll in the park, but Liss has noticeably become more relaxed lately. She forgets to bring an umbrella when going out, and Gina scolds her for it. Liss hurriedly returns home to get the umbrella, and suddenly it starts pouring rain. Gina quickly gets soaked, and she asks for help from passers-by, but they ignore her. Just when she is feeling lost, the half-sheep man who recently moved in appears behind her with an umbrella. Gina doesn't want to accept the half-sheep man's help. She wants to leave, but the rain outside is too heavy, so she has no choice but to turn back. To the half-sheep man's surprise, Gina speaks to him with a haughty attitude. The half-sheep man becomes furious. He criticizes and educates Gina. Because he is extremely wealthy, people with a bit of insight must show him deference. Therefore, the half-sheep man angrily scolds Gina, saying that the half-sheep man was like the other ladies. They spray themselves with what they consider high-end perfume all day, unaware that it is elven urine during estrus. Gina is humiliated by the scolding. She rushes back home in the rain. In the evening, Gina's brother wants to take revenge for her, so he intends to violate Liss. Liss knocked him unconscious, and then she escapes. Liss has nowhere to go, so she goes to the hotel to find her female companion. That evening, the Prime Minister's son, Falk, pays a visit, and Liss's female companion is there to receive him. Unexpectedly, in the middle of the night, Falk goes to the balcony to relieve himself, and gets kidnapped by a group of people. This incident shocks the entire nation, and the half-sheep people who were protecting Falk are executed. The Prime Minister's wife hurriedly seeks the help of a witch from their family, and sacrifices her most cherished pet. Fortunately, luck favors them as the witch accurately predicts that Falk was kidnapped by the Prime Minister's political enemies. At the ministerial meeting the next day, the Prime Minister restrains himself and remains calm. Unexpectedly, the political enemies continue to talk incessantly, disregarding Falk's situation. The Prime Minister becomes very angry, and disregards all laws and regulations, capturing the leader of the political enemies. The enemy alliance doesn't have time to react, and before they can understand what's happening, the Prime Minister has already subjected their leader to severe interrogation, while the Prime Minister doesn't know that his own wife, Pieretti, is the one behind all of this. It was her plan to kidnap Falk, solely to eliminate the Prime Minister's greatest enemy. Pieretti, pretending to be comforting, hands a glass of poisoned wine to the leader of the political enemies. After the death of the political enemy's leader, Pieretti skillfully fabricates a testimony, revealing the whereabouts of his son. The intricate conspiracy hidden within is almost seamless under Pieretti's manipulation. However, only the boy, relying on his keen intuition, senses his mother's secret from the sound of footsteps. Reed unexpectedly receives news of the female elf's death, and there are large crimson marks left on the riverbank at the crime scene. To uncover the truth, Reed leads the police officers to investigate the residence of the female elf. Surprisingly, a suspicious visitor was found in the wardrobe. The visitor claims to be an old friend of the female elf. The female elf was once a favorite of the gods, and her singing voice mesmerized the entire world. And that strange man is a circus performer. Their similar professions seem to bring Reed closer to him. After investigation, Reed eliminates the suspicion on the man. Then he brings a sheep-headed doctor to perform an autopsy on the female elf. Her liver is mysteriously missing. This supernatural technique reminds him of a witch. The witch reveals a secret. There is a magic in this world that can reorganize the organs of living beings and give them a new life. As long as personal will is applied, these reborn lives will be loyal to their creator. To prove her statement, the witch takes some of Reed's bodily fluids and resurrects a dead fish. Even more terrifying, these resurrected lives become nearly invulnerable, and no force can destroy them. Many years ago, the boy was born with a pair of wings. To help the boy assimilate into human society, his mother had the doctors cut off his wings. At the same time, to protect the boy, his mother sent him to an orphanage. However, this did not diminish the mother's longing for her child. This pain has accompanied the mother for many years. Every night, she would quietly visit when the boy was fast asleep. She would even softly sing lullabies in the boy's ear, trying to avoid drawing his or anyone else's attention. Every time, the elf mother would quickly disappear before being noticed. To protect her whereabouts, just last week, this elf mother met a tragic end at the hands of a demon. The headmaster of the orphanage suffered the same fate, and the doctor who had helped cut off the boy's wings became a sacrifice to the demon, with even his heart stolen. When Reed entered the orphanage to investigate, those memories resurfaced, and the familiar melodies seemed to echo in his ears. He gradually realized that he was the elf whose wings had been cut off. This revelation troubled him. Due to human prejudice against other races, people suspected that Reed had killed his own mother, and those who knew the truth to conceal it. His colleague York held animosity towards him, and took this opportunity to imprison him in a human cell, filled with hatred towards elves. However, when York returned to check on him, he was stunned by the sight before him. He saw that all the humans in the cell were knocked down by Reed. So, York devised a plan to disguise himself as Reed and escape, and then kill Reed. On that day, Reed was forcefully put a hood over his head and placed in a car. When he opened his eyes again, the person in front of him surprised him. It was the Prime Minister of the country. It turned out that after learning about the tragedy of the elf woman, the Prime Minister felt immense grief in his heart, but as a human leader, he didn't want others to know about his past with the elves, so he pretended to be calm. At this moment, he brought Reed here, solely to seek justice for Reed's elf lover. To the Prime Minister's surprise, when he pulled the trigger, the pistol jammed. Realizing that the other party was serious, Reed loudly called the Prime Minister father, leaving the Prime Minister dumbfounded. The old man finally learned a fact, that he had another son. He recalled his impoverished background, and his deep love for an elf singer back in the days. In order to vie for the position of Prime Minister, he left his beloved elf woman. At the same time, the elf woman, in order to protect her lover and unborn child, gave up her singing career, and chose to retreat from the world. From then on, the family of three lived separate lives. After finally recognizing each other, the father and son had a brief conversation. The father untied Reed, and arranged for him to leave, and stay away from trouble. The father promised to take care of Reed and Liss's future. After Reed left, the Prime Minister returned to the official residence. He wanted to sign a special pass for Reed. Unexpectedly, a half-goat person suddenly broke in, and launched an attack on the Prime Minister. On the other side, the witch sensed that her end was near. She realized that a demon was attacking. In haste, she prepared a dose of green potion. She had just swallowed the potion when the demon arrived behind her. Although the witch wanted to identify the demon's identity, she didn't have time to leave any clues, and was tragically killed by the demon. At this moment, Reed, upon hearing the sudden tragic incident, rushed to the scene. When he arrived at the crime scene, to his surprise, the witch was not dead. It turned out that the potion she had prepared in advance was a life-extending elixir, and she was waiting for Reed's arrival. It was then that Reed learned that years ago, the witch had prophesied to the Prime Minister's wife that the Prime Minister's son would surpass his father in glory. Nevertheless, the Prime Minister's wife discovered the Prime Minister's secret. He had a mixed-race illegitimate child. She began investigating in secret, attempting to eliminate this competitor. During Piretti's investigation, she discovered that 3 witnesses had concealed past facts. Driven by anger, she used witchcraft to gather parts of various evil creatures, and assembled a demon. The demon, following her instructions, eliminated the 3 witnesses, and took their livers. Piretti used witchcraft on these livers, allowing her to learn everything about the deceased's past. But these people were unaware that this boy was Reed. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister did not die. When the Prime Minister's wife learned about the meeting between her husband and his illegitimate child, she became uneasy. To secure her son's future, she made a decision. She suffocated the Prime Minister with a pillow. In the process, she dissected her husband's body and took his liver. Through mysterious witchcraft, Piretti learned about Reed's true identity, and also discovered the whereabouts of Reed's girlfriend. But she didn't realize that the witch had already sensed her intentions. The witch revealed everything to Reed. Just as Reed was preparing to take action, the witch died. Reed arrived at the location where the demon was present, its mutilated body appearing eerie and dangerous. Reed tried to avoid it, but accidentally touched a broken pipe, which startled the demon. Piretti, whose attention was also drawn, had her eyes turn yellow-green. She controlled the demon, and launched an attack on Reed. The demon relentlessly pressed closer to Reed. At that moment, Reed smashed the iron gate, pinning the demon beneath him. He then swung his axe, and severed the demon's head. Seeing that she no longer had the demon's assistance, Piretti decided to personally end Reed. Reed exchanged blows with Piretti, but just as he was about to approach her, the demon revived. The demon picked up its severed head from the ground, and placed it back on its neck, and the visible wound on its neck healed. At an astonishing speed, Piretti tightly closed the dungeon door. To prevent Reed from escaping, they engaged in a fierce battle within the dungeon. While faced with the demon's regenerative abilities, Reed's attacks proved futile. The woman controlled the monster, launching continuous assaults, and quickly gaining the upper hand. Just as the demon was about to lift Reed overhead, intending to kill him once and for all, a turning point occurred. Liss, who had broken free from her restraints, suddenly she swiftly appeared behind Piretti, and plunged the long knife, once used to torture the elves, into Piretti's head. As she fell, the demon lost its power, and Reed and Liss managed to escape. On the other side, Fox seized the opportunity to smoothly take over the political power, and became the new prime minister of the country. The daughter of the head of the prime minister's political rival also inherited power after her father's death. However, to everyone's surprise, the former adversaries united. This change shattered the existing power structure. The prime minister who once protected the elves and other races passed away, and his ideals disappeared with him. Fox harbored a dual purpose. He killed his half-elf brother and investigated the half-goat person who had murdered his father. Fox decided to seal off all the entrances and gather the different races together. A female elf attempting to escape was shot at. Watching Liss about to be captured, Reed decided to no longer hide. Seeking to make amends for his mistakes towards his beloved, he revealed his elven identity to the soldiers. As a result, a war between multiple races was brewing. Thus, the plot of the first season of the TV series Carnival Row concluded. The first season of Carnival Row premiered in 2019, and director Anna Forster created a captivating fantasy story. In a Victorian-style town, various mysterious creatures gathered their due to their escape. The story unfolds from a crime that occurs during a carnival night, interweaving multiple storylines in the series, including Reed's origins, his love story with Liss, and the foreshadowing of events, such as the half-goat person moving into the affluent neighborhood, and the potential for a multi-race war. Although the plot is complex, Anna skillfully maintains control over it, ensuring that the audience does not feel confused or impatient, coupled with impressive visual effects and atmospheric rendering, making it a fantastic TV series worth watching. If you enjoy my channel, please consider subscribing.